Shang-Chi is the latest addition to the ever-expanding Marvel Cinematic Universe. This time around, the universe explores Chinese culture, folklore and myths in a more fantastical and magical entry into the franchise. Shang-Chi is good, at times brilliant, but it's not without its flaws, many of which feature in the film's third act. The story of Shang-Chi is an interesting one. It's a fairly traditional superhero origin story, showing the main character evolve and learn until he gets all of his powers and abilities. What sets the story apart from other films like it is the use of flashbacks. In a similar fashion to Batman Begins, the film features flashbacks from Shang-Chi's life that explore his childhood, training and key events. These flashbacks are very well executed and never feel intrusive or distracting from the main story. Each one appears at a suitable time, adding to the storytelling, and they never outstay their welcome. Of course, a superhero film can only be as good as its hero. Luckily, Shang-Chi is a great lead character. He comes across as very human, hip, modern, cool and charming, and he has a dark side thanks to his history. Simu Liu does a fantastic job at bringing this character to life and making him a fully formed three-dimensional character. The villain of the film is also a standout. He's perhaps one of Marvel's greatest so far. Unlike most comic book characters, he is very sympathetic and his motivations are rooted in real-world elements we can all relate to. He's a character fueled by emotions and as such, he is very believable. The way the film explores this character and challenges his role as a villain is really interesting too. At times it isn't entirely clear if he's a villain or not, and that's great. The performance from Tony Leung adds a lot of depth as he constantly looks like a man with a lot on his mind. In addition to this are the female characters. It's impressive that none of the female characters fall into the typical romantic interest and or best friend tropes, one of which does hint at possible developments further down the road, but in this film the female characters are portrayed as highly capable and are given their own arcs within the main narrative. Sadly, some of the supporting characters are on the weak side, with many of them being bland and stereotypical and others serving only to further the plot or explain certain things. Where the story falters is in the third act. Here, the fantastical elements and the CGI are amped up, with mixed results. The pacing also suffers from overly long action scenes in this section and far too much exposition that tries its best to explain and ground the fantasy into the MCU we know. Much of the third act features large-scale CGI action along with generic and underdeveloped characters and world building. The film fails to make the new elements of the MCU interesting and relatable beyond a visual level, although the idea and concept of these elements is cool and exciting. The real highlight of the film is the action. The action is some of the best in the MCU. The choreography is great, with similarities to The Raid and the films of Jackie Chan and even John Wick. The choreographers expertly use the environment and objects, integrating them into well-arranged martial art combat sequences. It's a shame that much of this is absent in the third act, in exchange for much more generic medieval feudal style battles. The visuals are also brilliant. The film has a modern, colourful look to it, with homages to cyberpunk noir, spy films and more. Shang-Chi might be one of the best looking MCU films so far. One standout sequence is that of a fight club, featuring lens flare, good sets and plenty of fascinating characters. Shang-Chi and the Legend of the Ten Rings is one of Marvel's best origin stories. It not only introduces a great new hero, but a new world of possibilities, although more work on that front would be nice. Towards the back end of the film, the pacing and the story suffers a bit, but this is otherwise a highly entertaining film with plenty of surprises, laughs and thrills within it.